Hey everybody, Brett from AstartesGaming here, back with another look at the design journals for Chronicles of Elyria. Today we're going to be taking a look at the 10th design journal, which is going to cover maps, cartography, and navigation in the game. Before we do that, I just wanted to make a couple announcements, since I like doing it when I have face cam thing going on. Not going to be any Skyrim today, unfortunately. I'm still trying to get the mods to work. They're all installed now, but I'm having some issues loading my saves because I guess they're not in the same order or something. I don't know. I'm using loot still to organize them, and for some reason it's just not working. So I haven't had time to really troubleshoot it yet, but it shouldn't take me too long. I had a bunch of exams this last week, and so I didn't really have a lot of time for anything. But this next week is more or less open, so I should have more than enough time to handle it. Also, I posted a video about looking for people to join me in like an Arma 3 group type thing to play on the channel. So if you're interested in that, take a look at the video, or just let me know either on Twitter or on Facebook or on comments of one of my videos that you're interested, and I'll get back to you on that. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. I know it's been a while since we've looked at the design journals, but we've only got 6 left after this one, so I'd like to knock them all out. And then they have posted quite a few screenshots on the Chronicles of Elyria Facebook page that aren't on the actual website. So I'd like to look at those at some point too, and then if there's any other media that we haven't covered by the time we finish, I'd like to go through that. But yeah, let's go ahead and focus on this design journal now, because I don't want to talk for too long about unrelated stuff. So in last week's design journal, character roles and skill advancement, we talked broadly about the 4 different character roles, the different skill trees, including the survival and bardic trees, and how skill advancement works. In this week's design journal, we're going to delve more deeply into the explorer role with a look at 2 of the most compelling and innovative skills found in Chronicles of Elyria. In particular, we're going to talk about maps, cartography, the bardic skill used to make maps, and navigation, the survival skill used to, among other things, read maps. Alright, so maps. What do we got? Maps in Chronicles of Elyria are small, stackable objects which sit in your inventory like any other item. They can be bought, sold, traded, destroyed, stolen, and like most other items in the world, crafted. Unlike in many other MMOs, if you don't have a map on your person, you have no way of pinpointing your precise location. So that's going to really add to the survival elements of the game. Even with a map, it takes a skilled navigator and a high-quality map to know your exact location. So guides and Sherpa jobs are definitely going to be a thing in this. Of course, if you're moving around in areas you're already familiar with, there's no need to look at your map. So the map view, when looking at your map, you'll transition to a first-person perspective and view your map as though through the eyes of your character. Unlike in other MMOs, there's no user interface that shows the map, and it's rather impractical to look at your map while moving. Not least of which because having your map in your hands means you don't have your weapons. Encounter anything dangerous and you'll have to drop your map or stow it in your backpack before engaging the enemy. One thing I wish they would consider is, well, it's saying it's impractical to look at your map while moving. Not that it's impossible, but I do like in Minecraft, for example, where you can kind of have the map out in front of you. Let me raise my hand so you can see them. You can have the map out in front of you, but have it lowered or raised depending on what you want to look at. If you want to look at the terrain in front of you, you can lower it, but you still have the map out and sort of in front of you. I do like that a lot, and I hope they consider something like that in the game if that's not what's already in there. But it sounds like it's more of like a pop-up type thing in front of you. And let's see, map view. So it is being held by your hands, as you can see here, but it doesn't look like you will be able to raise and lower it, but that's just me speculating here. But you can see that it's very hand-drawn and not extremely detailed. And so that is going to make navigation a bit of a challenge in this game. Now, from what I understand, or actually, I'm not going to get too much into it yet. Let's read through the rest of this, and I'll talk about what I know from the Q&A sessions and stuff. Because I don't want to talk about something and then read over it in like a second after. So maps and families. As mentioned back in Design Journal 5, families and family selection. Your family is your support system in the world and are responsible for helping you learn your way about. One of the things that helps the most is having information about where you live, dangerous locations near your home, where shops are, where the nearest major towns are, etc. To help make sure this happens, maps are tightly integrated into the family creation process. Whenever you go through the process of creating children, the parents are required to provide a sort of care package for their offspring. This includes a basic set of clothing, a set of tools for the family's primary occupation, which could very well be a sword, as well as a set of maps. I say set because you'll need to provide more than one. That is very interesting though, and it's something that they didn't touch on at all in the previous design journal, which I feel like they maybe could have shoehorned in there, is that if you are looking to be a blacksmith in a blacksmithing family, one of the barriers to entry for that profession for you is going to be the fact that you already have the tools you need. You know, your family's going to give you those tools. You don't need to worry about them. Where somebody who's coming in as a ward or from a family that's not already involved in that profession is going to have to acquire those tools on their own. And depending on the profession, you know, the tools required could be very expensive. So that's something interesting that is a little bit more important than this design journal lets on, I feel like. Okay, so the map scale. This is what I was going to start talking about, so let's let this cover it, and then I'll add on if I need to. So Chronicles of Elyria provides a few different scales with respect to maps. These scales identify how much land is covered by the map, as well as what objects can appear on the map. Maps in Chronicles of Elyria are roughly divided up into 8 scales, which are, in order of increasing size, structural, so like a layout of your house; settlement, so like a layout of your village; regional, so maybe your village and the surrounding villages; county, like a large area with several villages and maybe some cities; duchy, you know, you get the idea; kingdom, continent, and world. So obviously the scales of the maps vary pretty widely, and depending on how far you're traveling, you may need to carry several of these. You know, if you're going from one end of the duchy to another, or maybe one end of the kingdom to another, you're going to need the larger maps to make sure that you're headed in the right direction, but also some of the smaller maps to make sure you know kind of what's around you as you head through there. Alright, so structural maps represent the smallest scale and can be used for mapping castles, ruins, dungeons, and underground caverns. Objects on a structural map will typically be the location of different rooms and hallways, where any items or traps are, and the location of any creatures. It's important to note that, in the case of monsters at least, they may roam around and aren't guaranteed to be where you left them, I would assume. But that's important to note, because that means that if you're going to be like an explorer and a dungeon delver, you can actually map out the dungeons that you are, you know, delving into. And so you may not be able to harvest all of the goodies in there. For example, there might be a dungeon with some really rare ore deposits or something that you just don't have the skill to mine, but you could map out that dungeon and then sell the map to a miner, or use that map to, you know, bring a miner and have them harvest it for you. So that's, I mean, lots of opportunity for interactions between players of different skill types, which I think is the way to build an MMO. At least, you know, that's how I feel. So settlement maps represent the second smallest scale. Objects on a settlement map will generally be buildings, farms, the location of important crafting resources, etc. In short, it helps you learn your way around the settlement. So this is like when you're playing Skyrim and you have the big map open and you press like the local map for like whatever city you're in, and it brings up like all the different buildings and stuff and the pathways between them. That's what this is. Okay, so regional maps are typically larger than a settlement map and more detailed than a county map. Examples of objects on a regional map might be the location of an unknown species of tree in a nearby forest, or the spawning grounds for a den of dire wolves. In general, regional maps are used by explorers and gatherers to communicate information about resources in the wild. Okay, that's interesting. So this would be very handy for like they said, the gatherers, the people looking for mines, for particular types of wood for their crafts, and you know, herbalists and people looking to hunt. Obviously, they're going to want to know what kind of plants or animals are available in that area. Okay, so county maps are scaled to roughly the size of an average county and are used to indicate, I never would have guessed that they're county size, and are used to indicate the relative position of major landmarks. These can be the location of settlements such as hamlets, villages, and towns. geographical landmarks such as rivers, lakes, forests, and trade routes, and can include large resource locations such as an established mine or quarry. I feel like depending on the mine, well, I guess they said established mine, so an established mine might be very big, but when I think of a mine, I think of underground, and so the actual presence on a map of a mine would be very small because a mine on a map is just like the entrance to the mine. It's not like the entire mine because it's, underground. But yeah, I guess depending on the mine, it could be very, very large. So duchy maps are perhaps the least common map type and show county borders and positions of large geographical structures such as mountains, valleys, massive lakes, beaches, forests, and watersheds. They also show towns, cities, the most important resource gathering areas, and trade routes between the counties or in and out of the duchy. Okay, not much to add there. Kingdom, continent, and world maps are the most expansive. I was going to say expensive, but expansive, and are designed to show duchy and kingdom boundaries, major cities, and principal trade routes in between duchies and kingdoms. World maps are largely decorative items used only to express the scope of the known world. Continent and kingdom maps are primarily used by kings and nobles to track diplomatic boundaries. So that's cool. It would be really, really cool to have like a giant world map in your house's decoration, especially if it was like a particularly rare one that was, extremely accurate. Or I don't know, I imagine maps like that probably wouldn't be very easy to come by because in order to have that much information, you'd have to compile resources from a lot of different people, I feel like. Okay, so object permanence. While maps can be edited, they do get stale because because the world keeps on living after a map is made. It should be understood that the map doesn't necessarily reflect reality. In specific, a map can be different from reality because things now exist that did not exist at the time the map was made. Things no longer exist which existed when the map was made. The cartographer only illustrated a subset of the total relevant data. The cartographer fabricated information for their own self-interest. This means there can be things in the world that don't appear on a map, and things on a map that don't exist in the world. Buyer beware. That is really interesting, though, because that means that depending on who the cartographer was that made your map, the accuracy can vary pretty widely depending on how they, how seriously they take their craft and how good they are at it. It also means that even though you may have a really good map at one point, that map may not stay really good. Although I imagine a really, really well done map is probably going to last you a pretty long time. Just because, I can't think of a lot of things that, like a mine might dry up, but it's still there. A den of direwolves might get, slaughtered or driven out, but I feel like for the most part, if the roads are there, the forests and the lakes and stuff are there, a decent map should probably fare you pretty well for a long period of time. So cartography. As mentioned in the first part of the journal, unlike other MMOs, maps in Chronicles of Elyria are player created. While the game will ship with a partial set of maps for different areas of the world, they'll be relatively low quality, fairly inaccurate, and without a lot of detail. It'll be up to the players, explorers and champions in particular, to go out into the world and bring back maps of different regions and the location of important resources. I like how they're starting you out with not nothing, but yeah, these maps suck. You guys, it's your job to go make better ones. I like that. Hopefully, from what I've seen, it seems like a lot of people are really interested in this, and I imagine we're going to get some really, really good maps from the people who are going to take it seriously. It's just a matter of finding those people, because I'm sure there's going to be plenty of people willing to cash in on it, even though they don't really care, and just drop something that kind of looks like it might be accurate, and really it's not at all. Alright, so creating maps. The process of creating maps in Chronicles of Elyria is a lot like creating maps in real life. When you sit down to create a map, you'll be presented with ink, parchment, and a series of tools to help you make the map. First thing you'll need to decide is what scale of map you're working with. This is important because the types of tools you use will depend on the scale of the map you want to draw. For example, if you're looking to draw a structural map, you'll need to put out the tools for drawing structures. This will include tools for measuring and drawing rectangular and circular rooms of different sizes, as well as stamps that indicate where things are located in the dungeon, or house, or workplace, or whatever it is. And so if you're looking to draw a regional map, then you'll want to pull out the regional tools. These will include stamps for things like mountains and forests, as well as Spline tools to help you draw rivers, lakes, and roads. Of course, it's not all about utility. The stamp tools, like mountains and forests, randomly cycle through sets of stored images, so as you cover your maps in patches of trees, it'll ensure it looks aesthetically pleasing. That's kind of cool, so it's not going to look too uniform. But they do look very hand-drawn, even though they aren't fully hand-drawn, I don't think. Again, there are tools to help you with this, so it's not like you're sketching everything out by hand, at least I assume not. So the power of names. This is a really interesting thing about the game here. I really, really like this. I'll talk about it more after we're done reading through it. When creating a map, the cartographer has the ability to select regions that she has identified on the map and give those regions a name. This is true for forests, mountain ranges, villages, mines, etc. If something can be stamped, drawn, or enclosed on the map, it can be given a name. Why is this such a powerful feature? Because the Soulborn engine keeps track of all the names given to a town, village, watershed, lake, kingdom, etc. And whichever name appears the most frequently on maps for that landmark, that's the name that it will be referred to by NPCs and by recent in-game lore. This has two powerful implications. First, it means that even after a kingdom has been sacked and the new king has changed its name, the region will continue to be commonly referred to by the old name until the new king has actively attempted to destroy existing maps of the region and paid a healthy sum to cartographers to create and distribute enough new maps as to officially change the name. Second, excuse me, this means it won't be uncommon to come across older maps, settlement, regional, or even structural maps, which refer to places that no longer exist. Long-lost civilizations from 1,000 years before may still be referenced in hidden archives. It may be worthwhile to the aspiring explorer champion to research books in the library and discover tombs to try and reconcile the new location of ancient places. Doing so could prove both extremely profitable and decidedly dangerous. A final note on the naming of landmarks. Writing on the map can be in any language the cartographer is sufficiently skilled in, so in addition to finding maps which reference places that no longer exist, you may find maps with writing on them that you can't read. So, what does this mean? It means that the people creating the maps have a lot of power. They essentially decide what things are called, how things are referred to, and while a name might not seem that important, the example that they gave, a kingdom being sacked and taken over by a new king, if you were, part of the old kingdom and you wanted the new king out and you wanted to sort of like if you were a loyalist to the old king and you want the new king out, you don't like the new kingdom, you want to bring back the old ways, having the kingdom still named the old name is kind of a powerful symbol, because once that name changes over to whatever the new kingdom's name is, that indicates that they have fully conquered this kingdom. And so that can be a really powerful symbol for a lot of things. Also, it's definitely going to be a motivating factor for a lot of people who are out to explore. When you find these things, if nobody else knows about them, nobody else can name them. And so if you find something first, that basically gives you naming rights, and you could potentially name something after yourself or whatever you choose. But it means that the people who find things first can really leave their mark on the game, because they can basically choose to name things whatever they want if they are the only ones who know about it at the time. Alright, so navigation. The final part of this week's design journal brings it all together. While maps tell you what the world looks like and cartographers are able to create maps, it's a player's navigation skills that allow them to use maps and other tools to find their place in the world. Whether navigating during the day or night, the first fundamental task of navigation is to identify which way is north. If it's daytime and you're both lucky and skilled enough to have a compass, you can simply check your compass to identify which way is north. If you're not, you'll need to use the position of the sun. I imagine if you're going to be doing a lot of exploring, a compass is going to be extremely valuable. But I guess that's true in real life, so why wouldn't it be true here? Once you've done that, you can position your body in such a way that checking a sundial for the time of day, see figure 3, which is below, we'll look at that in a second, or reading your map becomes possible. While oriented north, you can identify on your map the object that is closest in front of you, to the right of you, behind you, and to the left of you. Doing so will position your character's cursor on the map. The more accurate the map and the higher your navigation skill, the more accurate your character position will be. So until you are able to orient yourself on the map, you can't actually see where you are on the map. You just have a map. And so being able to read these maps really well is going to help you a lot, because not only are you going to get more information out of this map, but you're actually going to have your location shown on the map, which is really important. Makes things a lot easier, obviously. So putting your map... Oh, and another point at the end there. Just because your character position is on the map doesn't necessarily mean that it's 100% accurate. If the map is really bad, or your skill isn't particularly high, you could think you're in a different spot on the map than you actually are, which is kind of cool, but also kind of scary. False sense of security, for sure. So putting your map away causes your player marker to vanish, and you'll have to go through the process again in order to replot your position. One thing I'd like to add there is, I think it would be nice if they would sort of reevaluate that, because if you orient yourself on the map and you take like 10 steps forward after putting the map away, you still have a pretty good idea of where you are. So I think they should change that to maybe after you've moved a certain distance, because like depending on how far you walk, you can still orient yourself with the same objects, even if you've only moved like 10, 50, 100 feet. You can still see a lot of the landmarks that you saw when you started. Okay, so if it's nighttime, all of the above still applies, except you'll need to use astronomy rather than the position of the sun to identify true north. While most challenging, it's still possible to identify your position, more challenging, direction, and time of night simply by looking at a clear sky. And then here we have figure 3. So we have a sundial. You can see it's actually projecting a shadow onto the sundial, and it looks like it's a little bit low res, so I can't see what that is. It looks like 9 maybe, like IX, but I could be wrong there. Anywho, let's keep moving here. So sensory maps, and this looks like the last little bit here. The last topic I want to touch on was mini-maps. As a survival game, the one that tries to keep the user interface free of clutter, there remains an ongoing debate about whether or not to include a mini-map and what its true purpose is. We are currently including a mini-map, however it doesn't serve the same purpose as usual. Instead, it serves as a survival tool and is tied to your character's senses. If your character hears or smells something in the brush, regardless of whether you as a player heard or smelled it, maybe you're deaf, maybe you had your sound turned off, maybe you've realized you can't smell things in your game. I like the humor in these. There will be a visible indicator on your sensory map. This allows us to leverage both player senses as well as character senses and creates a tighter bond between you and your character. I do like that because there's obviously a lot of sensory information that you lose by playing a video game. Obviously, your peripheral vision isn't anywhere near as good. Like he said, you can't smell clearly. What else? Depending on your sound setup, you may not hear everything. You may not be able to hear which direction it's coming from. So this just kind of reflects the sensory information that you would have if you were really there. So I do like this. I think it's a good idea. I hope they keep it, but as they said, it's not 100% yet. So what's next? That's all for this week. Next week we put the parchment and plume aside and look at the other stuff your character can carry. In the next design journal, we'll take an in-depth look at inventory and equipment. So we'll get to finally look at how armor and stuff works, which I'm really excited about. Hopefully you guys are too. I found this really interesting. I don't know how much cartography I want to get into in this game, but it does seem really, really deep and rewarding if you're going to, really dive into this. So I think that's really cool. It's something unique that I haven't really seen in any other game, MMO, or, single player, or what have you. So I think it's going to add something really unique and new to this game, because this is one of the few games where you can actually legitimately go out exploring. In games like, the Elder Scrolls games, Skyrim and stuff, you can sort of do that, but you already have, a world map, basically. You already know more or less where you're going. You just don't necessarily know what you're going to find there. In this game, you can really get lost if you want to. or maybe you don't want to, but you can, you can actually get lost. You can go to uncharted territory. And so I think that's really cool, and I think that's going to pull a lot of people in, and I hope it does, because even though I don't necessarily know if I want to get into it, I think that the world of Chronicles of Elyria would benefit greatly from a lot of people being interested in this. So anywho, I'm going to go ahead and end it here. Next time we'll be looking at inventory and equipment. But for now, as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Please feel free to share my videos however you guys see fit, and I will see you guys back here for Design Journal number 11.